surprised that he's the king, but Leonie's guild member wonders if she should try to seduce him, which kind of freaks Leonie out. They all listen carefully, and Hakuna finally asks Grandfell for his name. Lee thinks that he should speak formally, as the man before him is a king, even if his kingdom has been forgotten. Grandfell doesn't really care, and just casually introduces himself as Lee. They are all surprised by his way of speaking, but Hakuna is unmoved, and notes that from now on, his name will be remembered for generations. The others are once again surprised by the king's formal speech, but alas, Hakuna explains that when he was engulfed by greed, he said that it was about time he should correct his mistakes, which Lee cringes over. After hearing that, he decided to self-destruct and take greed with him, but he saved him and also gave him back his crown. Suddenly, Harkham starts seeing his own king in him, as they share the same elegance. Hakuna asks, what was the reason for rescuing him like this? What is it that he wants to do so badly? He is a king with no subjects, as he killed all of his people with one single mistake. Somewhere else, Shrek's guild runs in the kingdom's direction, as this is a national-level event, as an entire nation just appeared on Earth, and it will be their El Dorado. His mind is filled with greed, as this place most likely has tons of it, and they need to grab the chance and make as much profit as humanly possible. Grandfell thinks of an answer, and notes that he thinks it's only right that he reconstructs this entire kingdom. Everyone is quite surprised that he said that, including the king, who looks down and asks who will follow someone like him, who has turned his back on his people once already. Grandfell tells him that it depends on what he does from now on. In order for him to regain his pride and correct his mistakes, he will help with it, no matter what. Hakuna smiles, and says that it's as if he is reading his mind. Grandfell didn't do that, he just read the quest window, which had these exact words plastered on it. When Hakuna tries to announce that it will be so, Shrek arrives and agrees that such a mighty kingdom should be rebuilt, and they, the Second Sun Guild, will help with everything. He scooches around everyone, and that's when he spots Lee, and notes that he heard a lot about him, while also thinking that it would be best for him to get acquainted with this person. He starts shaking his hand with great fervor, but that's when he notices Grandfell's expression and thinks that he probably shouldn't have done something like this. Everyone just keeps quiet as this happens, but Harkham comes around and tells him to stop, as this is extremely rude. Grandfell gnarls at him, not because he is angry or whatever, but because he literally almost fell asleep. His eyes won't even focus at this point, and the person in front of him looks like a bunch of hand-drawn cartoons. Grandfell ignores him for the time being and turns to Hakuna, as he has an offer for him. Everyone watches silently to hear what it is, especially the reporters, who are now basically at the movies. Later at the Berserker headquarters, Leonie reads the news about what happened. Gaon and Berserker will work together to rebuild Yusra. Harkham decided to stay there, and Shrek was ignored and treated like an invisible flea. This makes both Leonie and her member burst out in laughter. One of the members comes back with ice cream and asks why the others are so cheery. The other explains that there's an article on Shrek and how he was humiliated. Sure enough, when he goes to watch, he starts laughing too, as this is quite amusing. At the Gaon headquarters, people are also laughing at Shrek and his past internet activities, which were very cringe. But Chaelman is just happy that his brother got them a quest to rebuild the Yusra kingdom. Taemin just did as he said, but Chaelman is still glad and wants to kiss him, which Taemin immediately denies. One of the members wonders why they are so happy. Is this rebuilding quest really that awesome? Another member explains that it's not just that, it's the first ever kingdom that has appeared, after Arcana began updating into reality. Once the reconstruction is fully done, the value of that place will be priceless. He's also sure that there's a buttload of people who are trying to get on good terms with the kingdom, Shrek being one of them. Its value is so high, solely because it's the first national-scale update to the world. Plus, the kingdom is known for its resources, so it has tons of potential. If one accumulates enough influence and affinity with the kingdom, it's possible to even get a noble title after the reconstruction is done. In another place, tons of players run towards Lee as they want to get into the reconstruction project, all for different reasons, mostly greed. Lee escaped all of them by hiding in a nearby wall, but he is extremely tired and thinks that he won't make it home if things go like this. Should he just take a nap at the Mage's Tower instead? Suddenly, Jesse appears in front of him, which scares the ever-living crap out of Lee, but Grandfell just remains plain-faced. Jessie practices her new Korean greeting she learned. Step 1, to not wear her hat when doing it. 2, to put her hands in front. And 3, to bow down, as to show respect. All of this comes a bit crooked, but even in his extremely tired state, Grandfell finds it very polite. He tells her to take a seat, and apologizes that he doesn't have any tea, as apparently, they do not do rocket shipping to the mage's tower. Jessie notes that it would be bad if he were to be hit by that, so she will protect him, which makes him even more tired. So he asks her to get to the point. Jessie starts ranting about the magic he used, as she watched a few videos of him in action. Due to all of this explaining and talking, Grandfell becomes even more tired, and her words start blending together. Today was a long day, and tons of things happened, so he needs rest, but he wonders when he will get it. Jessie finishes her thesis on his powers, but Lee doesn't respond, as he's fast asleep. Jessie notices that his hair is in his eyes, which is disturbing him, so she leans over the table and fixes it for him. Eventually, Grandfell wakes up and wonders if that conversation was a dream, but it seems that it wasn't, as Jessie left him a letter. It was rather rude of him to fall asleep with somebody in front of him, but he couldn't help it. The Marcello research quest pops up, as a new condition was formed, to convince the senior mages. Grandfell wondered when this would happen, as he got into the mage's tower basically for free, so some kind of test was surely line up for him. But why now, as they are both extremely tired, even after they've slept a bit? He invites Marcello in, who announces that he has something to say to him. Grandfell says that he already knows why he's here. He needs to prove himself. Isn't that it? Marcello wonders why his hair is like that, but apologizes, as it's because of him that the people are also doubting him. Grandfell tells him that it's not him who is lacking, so he should guide him, as if they don't believe in him, he will make sure that they do from now on. One of the senior mages, Belia Yusia, sits in her class, and thinks that it's a shame that Lee will never prove himself to be qualified, as the 3-tier ceiling magic that was cast by 3 senior mages will not allow him to enter the room, and he won't even find it in the first place. Belia sits idly by and waits for Lee's imminent failure, as he can't hope to ever get past that door. But she is very wrong, as Lee instantly reaches for the door handle and enters, which shocks everyone there. Belia is the most surprised, as that man just destroyed a 3-tier ceiling magic with ease, something that even Marcello, who is the head of theoretical studies, couldn't do. Grandfell notes that it seems someone is trying to be funny today, as they are playing tricks on the doors. This overwhelming atmosphere washes over the listeners, while Grandfell continues speaking. He came all of this way, solely because it seemed like they all wanted to meet him in person. But if they are going to waste time by playing petty games like this one, it must certainly mean that they are ready to take responsibility. Isn't that right? He stands over Belia, not because he wants to intimidate her, but because they both fell asleep, which spooks Belia. They wake up shortly after, and Lee thinks that he needs to go and sleep right now, as this is too much, even for him. Grandfell, while leaving, announces that he will let them go this time, but he promises that this will be the last. Belia is awestruck and can only grin, as this man just called a spell that even she can't do anything to, a petty trick. Suddenly, one of the mages there remembers something important. That explorer that just came in is the same one that Cleo mentioned, the one that attended the academic society without an invitation. They begin talking to each other, and Belia is even more concerned now. Was that really the same man that saw through the Tower Master's illusion magic? While Grandfell sits down, and Lee can barely hold his eyes open, they receive a quest notification that 3 out of the 20 mages accepted him. They both think that it's fewer than originally anticipated, but it's fine, as they are all senior mages, who are basically at the peak of their respective magic schools. So 3 for just opening a door is pretty good. He's a demon hunter anyways, so he's not in a rush to impress these fools. While they both think of just sleeping at this point, a parchment with Marcello's face appears and calls out for him. He explains that this is a useful item, called a magical parchment. It's a message device that mages often use around here, and if he wants to reply, all he needs to do is talk with the parchment. Grandfell grabs it and sees Marcello's smiling face, so he hesitates for a bit, but eventually musters up enough courage to speak. When he does, however, Marcello tells him that he doesn't need to be so close, which naturally makes Grandfell drop him in the garbage. Marcello rises up from his rightful place and explains that he's here to apologize, As he heard what happened at the Crystal Hall, the others played a trick on him, which is unacceptable, so he came to apologize for their sake. A head mage is somebody who has reached the peak of magic, regardless of their school, and the senior mages want the head mages to consistently prove themselves worthy of such a position. Lee wonders if it's like how bullies at school fight to be the top dog. If it is, then he feels sorry for Marcello, as he might have it pretty tough. Marcello then says that this incident is no different than what usually happens. He was tested only because he's not good enough, so he apologizes. While he ignores Lee's fan fiction, Grandfell notes that he has not a thing to apologize for, really. A noble like himself must also prove himself constantly, so that they are recognized. He is no stranger to tests like these. Marcello still feels worried, as he might be underestimated because of him. Lee suddenly freezes, as he knows what's about to come, and can only despair while a short silence falls. If Grandfell hears the words underestimate, then he is about to say something extremely cringy. He does just that, and notes that if others underestimate him, he only needs to prove himself. And when people do the opposite, overestimate, he only needs to make it a reality. If anyone is doubting him, he can only continue to prove himself, like a leader, like he has always done. These words seem to touch Marcello, and he says that he was rude as well. He should have talked to him in person, rather than speaking through this parchment. Grandfell tells him that it's fine, but Marcello insists and insists, until eventually, he announces that he will come there right away, and Lee can only cry, as this means his rest is even further away. Grandfell sighs, and thinks that at this rate, they will get to sleep once they are dead. But still, earning the recognition of the senior mages is a tall order. As a beginner mage, or not even that at this point, it's going to be quite difficult for him, and also, he's only level 226, and the senior mages are all at least level 600, so he is nothing more than a beginner to them. However, he will not let something like that drag him down the depths of despair, as being able to prove those who underestimate him, and making overestimates of himself reality, is something quite special. He uses a bunch of spells to create beautiful scenery, and they both agree that this is the pride they share, the thing they have in common the most. Lee smiles while watching the lights, but suddenly starts throwing up, as Grandfell has used too much magic, so even a simple spell like this one is making them almost faint. Marcello arrives, and Grandfell welcomes him inside, despite being half alive. Somewhere else, at a construction site, Taemin and Chilmin see that the people are doubting Lee a ton, and they are both confused as to why. When Marcello enters the room, he starts looking around the place, and Grandfell asks what's wrong, as he seems a little distracted. Marcello asks if he used any magic recently in this room, which makes Lee think that it smells like it's burning, and Grandfell explains that he was just practicing a bit of basic magic. He promises to not burn the lab down thought, so he needn't worry. That is not what Marcello was concerned about, however, as there are tons of magical traces inside of this very room. Magical traces only occur after a spell has been cast, and these traces tell of what kind of spell has been cast, and how it was cast. Suddenly, Cleo also comes inside of the room, and notices how beautiful the traces here are. Suddenly, tons of others mages charge inside of the room, all with their theories about how the traces were made. Lee and Grandfell both wonder just why there are so many people gathered in one place, and surprisingly enough, even more arrive, as the traces are just that pretty. Pretty enough to win the 823rd Magical Traces competition, which is apparently a long-time tradition. Marcello explains that this is Lee's doing. He is the one who made this. But when he tries to present him, he is just gone, as he ran away as swiftly as humanly possible. He runs with his life on the line, as these mage nerds will never let him rest at this point. He must retreat. Unfortunately for him, a group of wacky mages appears and stops him, as they want to give him a challenge. To solve this Rubik's Cube, apparently one of the hardest problems to solve in the Mage's Tower, with the current record being an entire 9 days. While they brag about how difficult it is, Grandfell snaps his fingers and uses reversal magic, which completes the puzzle instantly. While he descends the stairs, the quest pop-up appears, with 4 more mages being convinced. Grandfell thinks that this might be easier than he originally expected. But before he can celebrate too early, tons of reporters stand at the end of the stairs, and they do what reporters do best, ask dumb questions, but they all bring up one thing, the issues that have been brought up with him. Grandfell says that they are extremely rude, and that he has no obligation to answer their moronic questions. But that's when the mages appear from behind and start asking him questions too. Since he is now in the middle of a pincer attack, Lee just panics as he wonders about how to get out of this hell. That's when they both notice that the mana flow on a nearby wall has changed, and thinking that this is their only chance, they jump in and seemingly disappear, much to the dismay of everyone who is chasing after him. He ends up in Belea's office, but she half expected this as she opened up that door, allowing him to come in, but he found it much earlier than she thought, as expected of someone so skilled. Lee remembers her and wonders if she really did this to help them, but Grandfell explains that he only felt the wall's mana being tampered with. This is the same with the Tower Master's illusion magic. He felt something strange about that wall, and inspected the mana to turn it back to how it was originally. Belea tries to hold it in, but can't help herself, so she starts laughing quite loudly, which makes Lee think that it's because of the way they talk. That's when she recites Grandfell's speech about underestimating him, which makes Lee almost die from the dangerous levels of cringe. But this also proves to be useful, as Belea notes that he's probably the only one that thinks the Tower Master's grand illusion is so simple. Alas, she also introduces herself, Belea Yusia, the head mage of the healing school. Since Marcello has also decided to recognize him, she will do so as well, and the count rises up to 8. Finally they get home, and Lee reads about what the reporters said about him. He thought he was in trouble at first, but this is all just pointless gossip, with the Gaon and Berserker guilds also coming to his defense, explaining that he did all of that by himself. However, one issue still stands. Why are they not sleeping yet? As a clear result of constantly finishing the class quest, they now have 33 stamina and 35 agility bonus points as a result, and he's ahead of same level players by around 10 to 20 points, give or take. This is a big step up for sure, but to a demon hunter, these two skills are completely useless. Lee thinks that he would rather have mana, but it would also be nice to have something for close range, something like that sword aura Harkam used when fighting him. While Grandfell cuts up some carrots, Lee thinks of how that ability went, which makes Grandfell also think about it. And suddenly, to both of their surprise, Grandfell uses the same ability and destroys the kitchen sink, while also creating a large hole in their apartment. At the Yusra Berserker reconstruction unit, Leonie watches something on her phone with a pretty mean look, which the guild members also notice. The first video is from Today Arcana, with the reporter noting that they don't have any conclusive evidence that Lee was the one who did everything. The next video is Huigang's live stream, who is protecting Lee with his life, as he saw himself how he took the cardinal sin down on his lonesome. The next video is a masked figure, who thinks that this is all a great conspiracy, and that Lee is just a government plant sent to indoctrinate all of them. All this combined makes Leonie smash her phone and scream tons of not-so-family-friendly words, which comes as no surprise to her guild. But her other female member comes around and asks why she's so mad. Leonie explains that it's because these losers are talking crap about Lee, even though he was the one that killed the boss on his own. This makes the guild member think that she's getting angry for his sake, which makes her blush hard, and so she starts proving that she isn't, which all but confirms that this is what was happening. The two male members note that she must have quite a hard crush on that guy. It's about time she had some action. These comments make Leonie bury them in the dirt, and the female member tells her to calm down, as this is all just gossip that will disappear soon enough. She also tries to make Leonie laugh by saying that if they raise their influence in this place, they might get noble titles, and then even the most powerful guilds will have to pay her respects. Sure enough, imagining this makes her crack a smile, but this also makes her think that this reconstruction quest is a good opportunity for them, as it's a natural treasure island where they can earn resources without going into a rupture. Even just the rights to develop a mine around here will be extremely pricey, so why did Lee give them this opportunity? She notes that they are now even more indebted to that guy, who is literally below them and wearing some cool glasses. While here, he checks his messages with his landlord, who is quite mad that the apartment was damaged, but Lee promised to pay the repair fees by himself. This was quite the mess though, as it was nice to see that they can use the sword aura, but not being able to control it is extremely bad, and as a result, his HP went down quite a lot, and they were both passed out for 6 entire days. Additionally, there's no info about something like this on the internet, so he will just have to ask Harkam about it. Suddenly, Two guards stationed at the entrance stop him, as the Yusra kingdom is currently under construction and only those who are permitted may enter. Does he perhaps have a permission slip? Or is he a resident? Grandfell notes that he has neither, so the guard refuses his entry. Lee thinks that this must be one of the Arcanians that moved here, and he's glad that he's enjoying his new job. Grandfell says that he's only here to meet with Harkam. Is there really no other way to meet him? The guard looks at him for a second. Then his expression becomes crooked, as he cannot let such a lowly peasant meet such an important person. It's just not possible. Grandfell then asks if it would be all right for him to at least send a message, but the guard refuses outright and tells him to stop speaking so informally, as he's clearly not on friendly terms with Theme. There are countless like him though, rude explorers who don't know their place. Suddenly, Hakuna arrives and greets Lee warmly, which makes the guard's face drop instantly. With that, his authority has been activated, and he is entitled to stay here as long as he wishes to. Hakuna asks what brings him around these parts, and Grandfell explains that he has business with Harkam, but it seems like he needs permission to get in. Hakuna is quite puzzled by this, as he should have the same authority as he does around here. What king needs permission to enter their own kingdom? Grandfell thinks that it just activated, but it doesn't matter, as he has some business to attend to now. Somewhere else, on a stunning beach, Jessica trains the other Lion Knights, while Grandfell talks with Harkam and announces that he wants to learn Sword Aura. He explains that he wants to control it better, as he is also able to do it. Harkam is surprised, as this is something that he had to train for, and it took a lot of time. However, he cannot help him, as Sword Aura is not learned simply because one wants to. He is also a mage, so even if he can see the Sword Aura now, he will need to train a lot before he can manifest it. Grandfell notes that when he said he can use it, he can use it. He can manifest it fully. What he really needs to know is how to control it. Harkam immediately calls Jessica over and orders her to bring him a sword and an oath of a lion. Eventually both things are brought, and the oath of a lion seems to be a giant stone slab with a lion face on it. Harkam explains that this is a relic that has been passed down for generations, and it's made out of a metal that does not exist in this world. It's unbreakable, and represents their oath because of it. One of the two sword slashes on the lion face was made by the first captain, and the other one was made by him. He hands Grandfell a sword, and tells him to etch a third slash in that metal, if he can really manifest Sword Aura, that is. Enoch tries to stop him, as this guy isn't even a member of their order, but Jessica stops him, as this must be a part of their leader's plan. Grandfell rejects his sword, and notes that he will be borrowing one of these instead. Harkam thinks that this is just a plain training sword, which is also dull, so what is he doing? Grandfell then starts unleashing his sword aura, and a blue light emanates from his location. Then he strikes the slab so hard it cracks, which shocks everyone, including Enoch, who did not expect that much power from a mage. Grandfell asks if this is worthy enough, but in reality their HP was drained quite a lot. The reason why Grandfell refused Harkam's sword was not because he deemed it too unworthy, but because it had a level limit of 600, because it's a legendary sword. The training sword had a level limit of 200, perfect for him, but it surprised the others. As to them, it is just a toy. Not for Grandfell, however, who thought that it was extremely heavy, and he was barely able to strike the stone. Harkam, naturally impressed by his potential, noted that it's time to train him, and also noticed that he is trembling, surely from excitement, right? That's when he ordered Jessica and Enoch to train with him, as he will need to start with the basics of swordsmanship. And with these two outstanding teachers he will have a good time. However, he must not use sword aura from now on, until he permits it again. Both Lee and Grandfell are glad, as they really needed to learn the basics. That is how Grandfell got into basic training, which Enoch isn't happy with, as he's a mage, who has no reason to learn the sword. But still, he treated the captain with respect by not picking up his sword, so he will be sure to show him some too. Jessica introduces herself and tells the trainees to prepare their bodies, as this training is quite harsh. With that, she sends them off to change into their training outfits, but thinks about Lee. Although he has manifested sword aura by himself, he is still a mage at the end of the day, so if he lacks stamina, he will not be able to use sword aura in any situation. She will work him until he can't stand up anymore. Grandfell comes back, and that's when his real muscles reveal themselves, which Jessica likes a lot, to say the least. With a blush in her face, she tells everyone about holding their swords, and Enoch instructs each of them when he spots them doing something wrong, as the rest of the trainees are extreme noobs who have barely held a sword before. While they don't pay attention to Grandfell, he thinks of how Harkam held his sword when they fought. His attacks felt very heavy, but also fast, and most importantly, strong. He realizes how to do it himself, and strikes the ground, which creates a large shockwave that, needless to say, leaves everyone speechless. Enoch asks how he did it, and Grandfell explains that it's simple, he just imitated Harkam. Jessica noticed too that it was their captain's swordsmanship, but that is the final step, that the Lionheart Knights have been aiming for years. However, this mage reproduced it after seeing it 2 times. She previously thought that he was just a lucky mage, but now she sees him for what he is, a damn genius. Harkam watches all of this from a distance, and thinks that Lee is a talented fellow, who may even surpass him one day. It would be a shame if he wasted his talents by being a mage. They will guide him, so that he doesn't get lost in the magic world. Hakuna also comes around, as he has heard his savior is starting to learn how to use sword aura. But is there not too much sand on this beach? What if his savior damages his bronchial tubes? Harkam immediately looks at his men and orders them to sweep every single grain of sand from the beach. Are they planning to give Lee tuberculosis? After they are done, Hakuna complains about the sun, as it is too strong. Will his savior not faint from heat stroke? Harkam looks at his men once again and orders them to grab as many trees as they can and plant them in the sand. Harkam is surprised that Hakua was so concerned about him like this. Truly, he is a paragon of the people. Seeing this, he cannot stand idly by any longer, so he removes his armor and announces that he has been too lazy lately, and as such, he will be joining them in training. They should not feel pressured and treat him as a new soldier. Naturally, this puts a lot of pressure on them, and they say that it's better to hear the new soldier's opinions too. Harkam says that they are right, and asks Lee if it's alright if he joins. Both Enoch and Jessica stare intently at him, but Lee doesn't care, and says that he will always welcome him. He doesn't stop there, however, as he tells Harkam that they should invite Jessica and Enoch too, which angers them to no end. And so, began the most awkward training session known to man, but they eventually got through it. At the Mage Tower, someone knocks on Mathis Dean Carl's door, who is the person who brought black magic, which was considered evil and unorthodox, to its current position, and had it not been for Marcello, he would have become the tower's top mage. He welcomes the knocking person inside, who gives him some of Lee's items that he requested to be appraised, as they seem to be related to black magic. Mathis notices that indeed, these are dark items that not just anybody could get, and requests some parchment paper, as he would like to write to Lee. Eventually, the night training is finished, and the other trainees are beaten. But Grandfell isn't, as he's still doing pull-ups, much to Lee's dismay. He blames all of this on Harkam, who wanted to do 120-kilometer laps, but Lee was the one that instigated all of this. Suddenly, the system congratulates him for completing a training that surpasses his limits, and as such, he will be rewarded, with stats, that is. Lee feels euphoric after seeing this, but before he can convince Grandfell to sleep, a parchment from Mathis arrives, as he has appraised the items he requested. First is the Vampire Orb, a magical tool used by demons. This item is extremely rare, so he would like to rent it for research. Lee thinks that he can't use it anyways, so he allows it. Next is the Pure Emerald Crystal, which recovers vitality, but it can also be used to produce jewelry. The last item is the Koi Scale Silk, which is a good material that can be used to create items, and he also wants to borrow for a bit. Grandfell notices that it opens an aesthetic stat, so he doesn't allow rental, but he would like him to make a handkerchief using the crystal and silk. Mathis accepts, but it will take some funds too, but Grandfell doesn't mind, as he wants the best results. Mathis is impressed by this, and Grandfell falls asleep, much to Mathis' dismay, as he wasn't done talking, so he leaves him a message, to meet him in the floating garden. At dawn, while everyone was sleeping, Grandfell was already on his training, and on the verge of finishing his 20-kilometer run. Another parchment from Mathis comes, who is worried that he didn't contact him, as he left him a message, but they did not see it, so he is relieved that he wasn't insulted by it. Mathis invites him to the garden once again, but Grandfell refuses. Mathis tries to reschedule the meeting time and time again, but Grandfell refuses. Mathis thinks that it must be a test of etiquette, but Grandfell is still refusing him, as he needs to focus on sword training now, and cannot waste time on personal meetings. However, he will have some time today from now, for about an hour, which Mathis is glad for, but they were going there in the first place, so it matches up. Harkham watches from the distance, as he is glad to see Lee so dedicated to the sword. The next day, Harkham pulls Lee away, and tells him that he can no longer teach him, as he has gotten to the stage where he can only learn from real fights. Lee is surprised by this, as he has been learning for just one day, and Grandfell also seems scared by it. Harkham explains that he underestimates himself too much, and that he should show him his aura again. Grandfell agrees, and thinks that he should control it as much as he can, but that's when he wonders, what is sword aura anyway? It's not a skill, as it can be mastered by every class. Suddenly Lee feels it, that it has a very similar flow to mana, and if he uses it as he uses magic, he can stabilize it, and he does just that. Lee has finally realized that sword aura is similar to magic, and if he applies all of the magic rules, he can stabilize it easily. Harkham congratulates him for being devoted mentally, as this is what he needs to handle sword aura in such a way. However, he did not expect it to be this clean, so he invites him, time and time again, to walk the path of the sword. Grandfell refuses, but if the path he is walking has a sword, then that just may be his path. Lee tells him to leave before he dies from cringe. With that, Harkham wishes him farewell, but it seems that the trainees heard their conversation, and they get hyped up. Jessica is kind of sad to see Lee advance so easily, as now, the gap between her and the greats seems even larger. However, something in her refuses to give up, and she promises to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Seeing her, Enoch gets hyped too, and Harkham is glad to have had Lee around here, as he has changed everyone's perspective. Lee walks through the forest, but wonders if it's safe, even with his newly acquired skill. Suddenly, a silver mane leopard appears, a level 300 beast, that Lee is extremely scared of, but Grandfell is angry, as this beast dared to show its fangs. He activates his sword aura and prepares to fight. Nearby, Kichi, the Shadow Mercenary Troops captain, finishes her slaughter, but unfortunately, she is the last member of the troop, as the other 9 are missing. That's when she sees Grandfell challenging the leopard and thinks that it's unfortunate. Even if he can use sword aura, the opponent is too tough, as he's the field boss of this island. It's a relief for her, as she doesn't have to deal with it. She would have helped, but she promised her colleagues a better place to leave, and this place seems to be the best. Lee thinks that now, he's into it deep, as he can't do anything against this beast. The moment he moves, he will be decimated. But he can't just wait, as sword aura consumes tons of stamina. Lee thinks that they can just block its movements, but Grandfell doesn't want to, as he wants to use the sword only. The leopard attacks, and Lee uses these last moments to apologize to his family for dying. That is not what happens, however, as Grandfell strikes the leopard even swifter, despite there being a 74 level difference. Is this really the power of the sword aura? Grandfell notes that this was just a warm-up, but his stamina is already depleted, so Lee tells him to calm down. At the floating garden, Mathis waits for Lee, and thinks that he's a renowned person by now, so he would also like to see who he is. Eventually, Lee arrives, and Mathis invites him to sit down, while also thinking that the earth was shaking while he was walking towards him. Truly, he is no ordinary person. Grandfell exchanges pleasantries, and Lee notes that their muscles hurt extremely badly, as Grandfell decided to test out tons of stuff using sword aura, and his body is trembling. That is why he has to flex his muscles like this. Suddenly, Mathis's rings glow a black purple. These rings are used to sense black magic, so why have they activated now, and with a color that he has never seen before? Grandfell wonders what to do, and Lee really wants to sit down. In the past, Mathis was bullied for his studies in the dark arts, but he firmly believed that all magic must be studied, so he took it upon himself to prove that dark magic was useful too. This led to him having an audience with the Great Hall, where he presented the usefulness of the dark arts. But he was met with mockery and anger. They did not accept him. He pleaded with them, as with this magic, they might even solve the problem of worldview interference. The president, who was also there, was not swayed by the opinions of others, and asked him if he had named this magic yet. Mathis confirmed that he did. It is called black magic. From that day onwards, Other mages began to accept black magic. But that glory did not last long, as Mathis couldn't solve the view interference problem with the black magic. After a few years passed, the Mage's Tower manifested on Earth as the worldview interfered, and this caused Mathis to live the rest of his days in shame, as he could not do what he promised. However, he did not expect to meet someone with so much black magic sensitivity. With this man, perhaps, he will be able to do what he couldn't do alone. Grandfell tells him to sit down, as he doesn't have that much time to talk, and the tea is getting cold already. Mathis explains that the rings he has detect black magic sensitivity, basically the person's talent, and he has not seen such a deep color before. Grandfell asks what black magic is, and Mathis notes that it's quite different from normal magic, that explores and interferes with the target's mana. Black magic uses inner darkness as mana, and so, it's different. This black mana is created through the years, and manifests stronger the darker a person's past is. If he has such deep dark mana, he cannot imagine what kind of life has lived in the past. Lee thinks that indeed, he had a dark past, as it was utter cringe, but perhaps it's not because of him, but because of what happened to Grandfell's family. He notes that this is unpleasant, as his etiquette is lacking. Does he really ask everyone he meets about their past first? Mathis apologizes, as he did not perceive this as rude. So he will report himself to his superiors and receive proper judgment. Grandfell says that his apology was enough, as an investigative mind is a scholar's virtue. He does not dislike a scholar who is devoted to his duty of black magic research, like he is. However, if dark magic is so different, can it be used even when the normal mana is exhausted? This tells Mathis that he is interested in black magic. So he tells him to walk the path of dark magic, much like Harkam did with the sword. It seems that he has proven himself to Mathis, and with his objective completed, he walks away, as he doesn't want to get dragged somewhere else. Back at his laboratory, Grandfell receives tons of messages from different mages, and with them, the quest is completed. It rewards him with relationship and status within the Magic Tower, which Lee enjoys, as they are extremely useful, but Grandfell doesn't care, and they both start to research a new function within the system. The news starts talking about the Yusra Kingdom, and about the two guilds that are rebuilding it, Berserker and Gaon, which has already risen to 3rd rank. Kjolman and Taemin watch this, with Kjolman noting that they have to repay Lee for this favor one day. Taemin thinks that he's right, as their guild is rising solely because of him, and if he hadn't helped them many times, they would have been in a really bad spot. Suddenly, Kjolman read about mythology and wished they would cooperate. They seemed to be as childish as ever, but this time, even a National Assembly member was involved. Taemin notes that these members of the National Assembly have tons of time if they do this. But if mythology competes for 1 end or 2nd place in the business world, does the National Assembly move on money alone? They both don't know how they managed to get their pockets so full, as it remains a mystery. In an apartment, one of the Assembly members is bewitched, and his soul is being extracted by the mythology guildmaster, Baek Yiseol. She calls her secretary, and tells him to cancel all of the plans for tomorrow, as even if she had an important meeting with a certain person, he should tell him that it's cancelled, and that she left for the Yusra Kingdom, as she wants to meet a certain somebody. At the Mage's Tower, the feature that Grandfell unlocked is related to it, but he doesn't have time to check it, as his phone is being spammed by his sister. Before he can check, a parchment arrives, from the head mage Maya, who excuses his rudeness, but he wants to do a joint research. Suddenly another parchment arrives, and tons more arrive. Doing what he does best, Grandfell ignores them and runs away. At the Yusra Kingdom, which now has a palace, Hakuna laughs at Lee's explanation. He must have really needed that peace and quiet. Hakuna tells him to not be bothered by their attitude, as it's their way of showing sincerity. Grandfell notes that he does not like bribes, even if they come in the form of sincerity. Hakuna laughs once again, as this must be why he defeated the cardinal sins so easily. But did he see that video, which shows him actually defeating greed? This is the first time he hears this, but before he can check, his 3rd sister calls him, so he picks up. When he does so, she starts reciting the cringy words he said to Hakuna, and even shows him the HD video, as they all mimic him. Grandfell thanks them for watching, and closes the call. Afterwards, he requests a place to rest. When he arrives at that solitary place, he immediately becomes comfortable, and prepares some tea, while searching for the exact video. He finds it, and thinks that he might just sue them for putting it without his permission. But that's when Grandfell feels something strange, but similar. Dust, so he must get to cleaning. At the Gaon reconstruction base, Taemin is shocked to see that their stock fell hard, and Cheolman explains that it's because mythology spread a rumor about them again. He thinks that this is their way of saying that they need to share the Yusra reconstruction quest. But when did they gain this much influence? While Taemin continues to scream his heart out, he can write fake news too, about their guildmaster and how she has a mole hidden on her body. Suddenly Yeseol hugs him and asks how he knows about something like that. He seems to know things that even she doesn't. How interesting. Taemin wonders how she got in, as the guild members must have been standing guard, and when Cheolman goes to check, he finds them unconscious. He hopes she knows what attacking guild members means, but she explains that she didn't attack, she just let them fall asleep. Suddenly, Cheolman is suddenly engulfed in a strange but familiar feeling, and the dots finally connect in his head. Yeseol became this powerful and rich, not because of her connections. Taemin screams at her, as she's really crossing the line this time. Cheolman's thoughts continue. The reason she was able to become like this is because of mind domination magic. That should not work on players, but it does. He tries to warn his brother, but he cannot, as this is just like the time he got possessed by the damn imp. Out of nowhere, Grandfell arrives, who notes that he just finished cleaning, but the smell around here is not refreshing at all. He walks up to Yeseol and tells her in her face that she's a demon,